My name is Walt Green, and I am from Norfolk, Virginia. I ran cross country and track at Northview High School, which earned me a track scholarship to Virginia State University. However, I am an avid football fan and have watched over 50 years of high school football in the Tidewater area. In 1969, I watched Northview's Larry Stepney score a plethora of touchdowns en route to becoming an All-American. In 2019, Stepney became the only Norfolk athlete in any sport to be inducted into the Virginia High School League Hall of Fame. In the fall of 1982, my senior year at Virginia State, my dad called me and told me that a Lake Taylor High School football player had just died in a car accident. He also told me the other details related to this tragedy. Al Hatchett was also a team leader and one of their best players. So obviously, the team was hurting and full of emotion. So they decided to dedicate the season to Al. But the Titans lost their next game to Kecoughtan 7-6, despite outgaining them by 350 yards. And their record was 0-2-1 after 3 games. However, they won their next 3 games over Maury, Cox, and Granby, and next on the schedule was their arch rival, Northview, my alma mater. Ironically, that year, my roommate at Virginia State was a former Lake Taylor football player, Derek Banks, and I told him that Northview was going to end their winning streak. But first, a little background. Northview and Lake Taylor were rivals in all sports, but the football rivalry was off the chart. My sophomore year, they painted a huge red L and T in the middle of our football field. Then, someone went to their school and painted Northview all over their sidewalks. Anyway, Lake Taylor were district champions in 1973, led by Super Bowl champion Tommy Graves, and were also district champions in 1976, led by Super Bowl champ famous Amos Lawrence, who rushed for 411 yards in a high school game, and later became the second person in NCAA history to rush for over 1,000 yards in 4 consecutive seasons, while at North Carolina. However, Northview had won 4 of the last 5 district titles and was the team to beat. But Lake Taylor was clearly on a mission in honor of their late teammate Al, and whipped Northview 25-7 to move into first place with 3 games left. I told Banks that team was special, and I was going to check them out the next time I went home. 3 weeks later, I went home, and by then, Lake Taylor winning streak had grown to 6 games, and I watched them play the number 1 team in the area, First Colonial, a perennial powerhouse. Both teams had won their district, but the game would determine the regional playoff pairings. This was an exciting game that ended tied at 24, but Lake Taylor clearly outplayed First Colonial. Also, Lake Taylor had some very talented players, but the best player on the field that night was number 5, Steve MacArthur, who scored 3 touchdowns and had close to 300 yards of total offense. MacArthur was named Player of the Week for his outstanding performance. There is a familiar saying that everyone knows: in big games, big players make big plays. And the Titans were going to need a lot of big plays, because next was the regional semifinal against the nationally ranked and 2-time defending state champion Hampton Crabbers, who had just tied a state record with 35 consecutive wins. Ironically, their last loss was in 1979 to Northview in the regional semifinals. Also, their coach, Mike Smith, recently won his 500th football game to become only the 3rd coach in the entire nation to win 500 high school football games. Anyway, Lake Taylor upset Hampton 17-14 with big game Steve MacArthur scoring the first touchdown and making a game-clinching interception. MacArthur was featured in the newspaper and said he was inspired by Al in that game. In the regional final, the Titans smashed First Colonial 23-7 to advance to states. In the state semifinal against Dinwiddie, Tony Grady and Fonzo Wiggins scored on long runs, and big game Steve MacArthur sealed the win with an interception. In the state championship game, Lake Taylor lost to George Washington Danville. However, the loss was moot compared to all of the adversity the team had faced that year. Also, it is worth noting that the Lake Taylor fan following was so big that the team became the first Norfolk school in many years to meet all of their expenses from gate receipts. And their band was so good, they received a standing ovation from the George Washington Danville crowd. The 1982 Lake Taylor Titans miracle season belongs in Hollywood. Ironically, another team with the nickname Titans became an award-winning film, Remember the Titans. And it was also very ironic that their 1971 journey went through Norfolk, Virginia at Foreman Field, where they beat Wilson High School 36-12 in the state semifinals. In concluding, I would like to commend Steve MacArthur for doing this project, and hopefully this inspiring story will end up in Hollywood, where it belongs.